Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
Yes, it's me, Egbert. As the new owner of this station, I want to make sure we have the best talent on the air. That's why I've decided to ban all real estate agents and only have real talkers like Brad and John. Here they are, B and J.
You know, I've been thinking about that comment from Egbert, John. I think he's being a little bit less inclusive than he should be.
You know what? And as the chairman of the Egbert DEI committee, I would like to say that we should investigate this.
Well, you know, I think he's going the exact direction that Rick and Tracy Ellis are going, but in the opposite direction because they don't want any rhinos on their radio station. So,
right.
You know,
and you and I are both hippopotami.
You know, isn't it amazing that how discriminatory people are? I mean, I'm always amazed at territorialism and discrimination, and not racial or sexual or anything like that. Just, okay, he drives a older car, and it's an American-made car, and, you know, he should be, if he's anything special, he should be driving a new car, and it needs to be a foreign car. You know what I'm saying? It's stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, that is John.
And what is diversity if it's not? And that's what so many of our corporations ignore is we talk about diversity and we look at things like race and sex and what kind of pronouns you have. When we tend to ignore as corporations. Gosh, I'm out of that world. I shouldn't say we. Corporations tend to ignore diversity, things like what is your socioeconomic background, or what is, most importantly, what is your life experience? What did you do to get here?
Or do you play pickleball or not? You know what I'm saying? I mean,
and if you play pickleball, should you be sent to a faraway island?
Right.
Not a pickleball guy, Brad. I don't care how many courts they put in Chesterfield Mall. Not a pickleball guy.
Man, once again, I go on one of my, not my year, but my old high school's, Facebook page, and I can guarantee you that if I go on the Facebook page, one of the top 3 posts is about them playing pickleball and then going to Harpo's afterwards.
Now, is the allure of pickleball, do you not have to run as much, or what's the allure of pickleball?
Well, you can't.
It's like tennis, but it's a smaller court. Am I right? Or am I wrong?
It's like half the size of a tennis court, but the deal is you can't get the ball going real fast. You know, it's not like, I mean, if you see these professionals, you know, like when they make a serve, I think that it's very easily the ball travels over 100 miles an hour.
On pickleball?
No. In regular tennis.
Oh, in tennis. I see. Yeah, right.
And that's because they have a strung racket and the ball's very bouncy. Whereas in pickleball, it's a paddle and the ball is much less bouncy and it's a smaller court. And the game is not as running back and forth. You know, if you watch some of these singles matches, you see if you get 2 players who are very good, they'll go left, right. You know, they'll keep their opponent going back and forth and back and forth. And pickleball, for the most part, is, at least where I've seen it, it's usually played in doubles. I don't know if they even do single pickleball.
When I've seen photos of it, that's what I see too.
So anyway, that's John Combest. Every day he slaves over a hot computer and puts together a list of what he thinks are the top stories in the state of Missouri. He gets those stories by looking all over the websites and listening to radio and TV and internet interviews and things like that and podcasts. And he publishes this every morning on johncombest.com, C-O-M-B-E-S-T, johncombest.com. And we defer to him every morning at this time to say, John, tell us the top 3 things on johncombest.com.
A real challenge today, Brad, because there are so many that could be in the top 3, but we're going to be ruthless and we're going to narrow it down. Number 3, we're going to put in the block of marijuana.
Here we go again.
The leader of the industry group in Missouri, which is called MoCan Trade, a gentleman named Jack Cardetti, is pretty much doing a 1-year victory lap about the success of marijuana. And regular listeners to our show know that we talk about this a lot, talk about the financial impact that the cannabis industry has on Missouri. So Jack did kind of a victory lap with the Missouri Net today. You can find the link on my website, of course, where he talks about the economic benefit, sales. And in his assertion is that the successful medical marijuana infrastructure set up the recreational, we're not supposed to say recreational anymore, Brad. I don't know if you're hip to this. It's adult use. The industry doesn't like the term recreational.
Why is that?
I guess
is that because it could be kids?
Because it suggests that some people might use the drug as some sort of a freewheeling, let's have a good time and take some dope. Whereas if you say adult use, that seems much more serious.
I have to tell you the truth. I think it's just the opposite. Because if you say let's go some adult entertainment, that's like no, seriously, that's like East Side stuff. You know what I'm saying?
I get exactly what you're saying. And your car, thanks to the fact that you drive a high tech car, as you mentioned earlier,
right?
Your car takes you exactly to the East Side because for you it's a well worn path for professional reasons, not for any dancers.
Once
but
again,
back to our story, Brad.
When I used to drive it, go into work every day, I worked over at the airport over there, but that's a whole nother story.
I know. You know what? And there's an old Monsanto Drive over there, isn't there?
Right.
So the marijuana industry is front and center. Also, there's a discussion among legislators now, and I think you'd find this fascinating, particularly, Brad, the idea of if someone is intoxicated by cannabis, do workers' compensation laws apply to them?
So the idea being is if they're stoned and they cut their finger off, do they not get workman's comp? Is that what you're
Correct,
essentially saying?
because it's legal. Like they're not under the influence of an illicit substance. And the question is, how do you even? And one of the lawmakers, I think it was Richard West actually from St. Charles County, pointed out there's really not a good way today to ascribe intoxication to cannabis.
Well, that's the problem. They don't have a breathalyzer.
You can do a blood alcohol test, but you can't do, as far as I know, you can't do a cannabis blood content test.
I think you can. I think you can do the blood test, but you can't do like the breathalyzer thing. The breathalyzer. I
get what you're saying, but I imagine too. I'm just guessing here that's probably prohibitively expensive. Well, like it's not like blowing into a breathalyzer.
Well, no, let me take that back a minute. Okay, but you just said the fact that it's a legal drug. Well, wouldn't that be the same thing if you go to work drunk? And you cut your finger off in the bandsaw? Aren't you still?
That's what the debate that the legislators are having, and some of the measures that legislators are introducing, as I understand it, are preemptive. So in other words, if marijuana is one day legalized federally, which I think most people think that that's the direction that we're going, does it matter if the federal government says marijuana is legal? Anyone can use it.
I don't see. To me, I don't understand the whole thing. I mean, I've never been into marijuana. I've never been into illegal drugs. To me, it's like, all I can think of is this is my thing with marijuana. I think of two things. I think of Cheech and Chong, and
exactly.
And I think of like my high school days where, hey, let's get some marijuana and get stoned. I'm going like, man, I don't know.
Well, but and think of how much that's changing. So, Brad, first of all, I'm in the same camp. So I came up during the Nancy Reagan, just say no. I saw Nancy Reagan on Different Strokes, and I was like, man, I'm never touching that marijuana in my life. It was even on a Dukes of Hazzard episode as well.
It was Nancy that did it.
Think about a kid today, Brad, that's in elementary school, whose grandma, she has to smoke her medicine because she says that her eyes, she's got that glaucoma thing or whatever she has. And then, dad, as we talked about before, dad can't, it's really hard for dad to figure out the carpool lane at school some days. And it's just so stressful that dad needs a little bit of that Northern Lights cannabis sativa to bring him down, you know?
John's being facetious again, aren't you?
I'm being serious, Brad. Think of the
right.
men in suburbia that rely on this to get through the course of a stressful thing like a grocery store trip.
Yeah,
or, you know, dealing with their harpy wife or something.
Right, a harpy wife. We don't have harpy husbands?
Oh, we have. I bet you we have more harpy husbands than we do harpy wives.
Yeah, you have to be an equal opportunity offender on that one.
Hey, I am. And you know what? I'm harder on men than I am on women, and I should be. Now,
that's
the
what he
number
said.
2 story today. It comes from the Springfield News Leader, and it follows up on something that we talked about at the beginning of the week, the moment of truth for political candidates. This piece is in the Springfield News Leader by a woman named Kelly, and I don't know how to pronounce her name, Brad. It's Dereuck. And as a guy, by the way, whose last name is Combest, I'm very sensitive to people mispronouncing things thinking they're funny. So we'll just call this woman Kelly. She has a piece that gives an overview of statewide candidates. The takeaway from this, Brad, is that once again, Mike Kehoe has the most money in the governor's race. I would point out that in this News Leader article, the reporter switched Jay Ashcroft and Mike Kehoe when talking about Jay Ashcroft's Political Action Committee. That's a pretty big detail to get wrong in a story. It's the kind of thing that if you had an editor that gave a heck, they'd probably catch it in the editing thing.
So you're saying they misidentified, they switched the two as far as in the story is concerned?
Yeah. And the joy of the Springfield News Leader, by the way, so I'm an online subscriber, so I pay monthly to subscribe to the digital feature. I correct many of their errors, which sometimes get corrected in the paper. The News Leader does a very poor job of acknowledging reader feedback. There's a gentleman named Stephen Herzog there who does a passable job of acknowledging it. But this reporter, I'll correct this on Twitter. She'll see it likely, and she won't acknowledge it. The editor-in-chief will see my correction, not acknowledge it. Doesn't matter that I'm a subscriber and that I'm offering constructive feedback. They will often make the changes in the paper, which is really the most important thing, Brad.
John, can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
I think you've fallen into the Ed Golterman comment category. You know why?
Because I expect people to I have an unrealistic hope that people will accept constructive feedback helpfully.
Well, Ed Golterman is complaining on his face. If you don't know who Ed Golterman is,
I only know him because of you.
Go look at Ed Golterman's Facebook page. According to him, the world revolves around the Kiel Opera House, which is now the Stiefel Opera House or Stiefel, whatever they pronounce it. But essentially, it used to be the Kiel Opera House. And he complained the other day that apparently everybody at Channel 5 now has blocked him. And
I bet they have.
And I asked,
and isn't there a difference, Brad, between and let's use the word harpy again, about being harpy toward the media about their coverage and things you don't like, versus saying, hey, Jay Ashcroft is not the same person as Mike Kehoe.
Well, his whole thing is, if you read his comments, and all he does is sit at home and listen to Camo X and watch Channel 2, 4, 5, and 11 and criticize the news comment. He claims they're not covering news and it's all soft news, and and he'll give the analysis that, like, in a half an hour news program on Channel 5, they talked about somebody's hot dog stand and somebody's car dealership, and he's essentially saying, and he's always saying, where are the crime numbers? Where are the crime numbers? The problem with that is that once again, I have not one but 2 journalism degrees. People, I think, have gotten to the point where they don't care about crime numbers anymore. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
because what you're saying is people already accept the fact that the city is in terrible crime shape.
Right. If you hear
and that it's not anything new.
If you hear the crime numbers for Ladue or Frontenac or Town and Country or Chesterfield or Wildwood, you go, whoa, boy, they've got some crime out there. But if someone says, there's been 14 shootings and 36 carjackings and 14 armed robberies today in the city of St. Louis, people go, another day in the city. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's all noise.
Right. It's just like, okay.
I get what you're saying.
Right. Okay.
And the takeaway from the News Leader story, if you look at these numbers, and I would recommend, I anticipate that over the weekend, Jason Rosenbaum will do an accurate look at this. So you could look at Jason Rosenbaum or maybe the Kansas City Star. They have a pretty decent reporter named Kason Bayless over there, really liberal but competent. I would imagine that they would do a little bit deeper dive and a more competent dive on this race. The takeaways, the good thing is, if you're Jay Ashcroft and Jay Ashcroft's campaign manager, who, by the way, he had to go out of state to hire a campaign manager. I guess there's not enough talent in the state of Missouri to run a campaign. But Jay Ashcroft's quote was that Jay continues to lead by a double-digit mark in most independent polls. That's the quote from Ashcroft's out-of-state campaign manager.
Interesting. And the number one story
involves your friend and mine, Cori Bush. She got quite an endorsement from a New York congressman named Jamal Bowman. Now, you might remember Jamal Bowman from pulling the fire alarm.
He's the Mr. Fire Alarm guy.
Mr. Fire Alarm guy. It's not to be confused with Mr. Telephone Man. But Mr. Fire Alarm guy, he has endorsed Cori Bush's plan for reparations, which the price tag is a cool $14 trillion.
$14 trillion,
and the best part of it, Brad, is that Jamal Bowman says, when people ask about the money, he says that we can spend it into existence. Now, what I love about this is that's a very millennial / Gen Z phrase. Like, you know, if you say, hey, speak it into existence, put it out into the universe and it can happen. And his point is to a New York paper, he said that he used COVID as an example. And he said that critics said that we didn't have the money to do COVID relief spending and that we didn't have money. We couldn't just give people pandemic payouts and bail out companies, but we did it. And the same thing can happen for reparations. Jamal Bowman's number is $333,000 for every person who's been injured by slavery. I mean, of course, none of them are still alive, but you know what I'm saying. So anyway, Brad, speak it into existence. That's the phrase of the day for Friday.
I'll never understand this whole thing. The whole thing to me is just bizarre, weird stuff. You know, there's so many people that came over to the United States after slavery. Look at all the immigrants that came over in the late 1800s, early 1900s. You know, I mean, look at the immigrants that have come over in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s had nothing to do with this. You know what I mean?
I don't see a lot of Asian Lives Matter protests. I don't see a lot of Asian Lives Matter riots down Mid-Rivers Mall Drive.
It's like you said, you're part, Irish and Scottish and stuff like that? Look at the discrimination the Irish people face.
Look at my people.
Yes.
And boy, I carry that generational trauma every day, Brad. And when I see a German like you, I just fume, you know?
You know what's interesting is if you take any type of course, like if you take the any type of a motivational course, if you take who's the Tony Robbins kind of thing.
Yeah.
What they teach you is they teach you to leave your past behind you.
Let it go. Release it, Brad.
Exactly.
You have to release your past.
If bad things happen to you, try to get those out of your mind. Do not let those taint your view of what you do today and the fact that, like, my mom was notorious for this. My mom was, 30 years ago, this guy said, Mom, move on. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
now,
if you don't want to roll a lot of baggage around, there's not a whole, if you shouldn't be bringing a carry-on to every interpersonal relationship you have.
Now, in my mom's defense, if that person would have bothered her for 30 years, then she has a point. But if it happened 30 years ago, move on. Okay, which means we have to move on. And when we get back, my number one question to you is filibuster. And I know you'll know the story on this because, once again, I don't quite understand what's going on. Maybe you can explain it. I'm sort of scratching my head going, I don't exactly understand what's going on with this.
In Jeff City?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
okay, yeah.
Okay,
Let's talk about it.
and our buddy Bill Eigel was involved with it, right? Of course.